Welcome everybody to Econ and Finance Career Day. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Maddie Alder. I'm an econ student, and it's so exciting to see some of your faces over Zoom. So let's see, to start off, we have a bunch of people across different professions, so Aggie alum and some faculty who are here to tell you about different ways that they've used their econ and finance education to have different applications in the real world. So there's representatives in law, academia, different finance professions. So I think this will be a great taste of a lot of different experiences. And I think it will be helpful for people who are trying to figure out what they're doing or maybe looking for some tips on how to succeed in their careers. I'm really excited. I have so many interests. I was reading through the list. I was like, law, academia, these things are all interesting to me. And so this will be kind of, to me, it seems like a little taste test of a lot of different ways that you can use your econ and finance degrees. So just a couple notes before we jump into things. Each person will give about 10 to 12 minute speech or talk about what they've done in their careers and their experiences, and then we'll open it up for questions. So as you're watching, take note of some questions you might have. We'll ask a couple questions at the end, and if you want to, you can drop your question in the chat and I will ask it, or when someone's done talking, you can just unmute and ask your question. If you know how to use the raise hand feature, you can also do that and I will call on you. So we'd love to hear your questions, have it be a little bit more interactive. And other than that, I will give a little introduction of every person before they speak. And I think we are ready to go. So remember, put your questions in the chat or ask them. You can just ask them on your own after the person's done talking, and we're excited to hear what you guys have to say. So the first speaker that we have is Padram Jahangiry, and some of you may be familiar with him from your classes. I was lucky enough to have a class from Padram, and I was realizing it was a year ago because I remember he was like a soon-to-be dad when I was taking his class, and now his son is 14 months old. So that makes me feel old. His son is walking, and I didn't even know that. But in the professional sense, Padram studied. I was impressed to learn when I was in his class that he studied engineering and then went on to get a PhD in economics. So if you think economics is tough, try adding in like a degree in engineering along the way. He's worked at BlackRock, which is a financial investment company, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. And now he's on faculty here at USU and teaches economics. So if you have a chance, take a class from him. And here's Padram.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maddie, for that kind introduction of me. Well, thank you, Maddie, for having me, and thank you all for joining our first ever Econ Career Day, I believe. I'm so glad to see you, to see your passionate faces, curious, and maybe some of you are kind of lost and confused. That's totally fine. No, that's when I was at your age, I had no idea that I will become a professor one day. So you're not alone, don't worry. So, frankly speaking, when I was offered to give a speech today, at first I was kind of hesitant because I said, there are many more experienced and, frankly speaking, more qualified professors here at Huntsman School that could do this way better than me. But as always, Professor Paul Felstead kindly reminded me of my unique, and I say strange or different path to how I become an econ professor. And maybe I thought that maybe it's a good idea to share my story with you. And so here I am, and I have two stories for you today. The first one is going to be a long one, and actually it's the story of my life, but don't worry about it. I'll jump into the college years and try to make it short. And the second one is actually is a joke, right? But to me, that was one of the most eye-opening and inspiring stories that I have ever heard and changed my life completely. So, all right, so the story of my life, years and years ago, I was born in a cold, snowy day. So my parents named me Pedram, which means happy in my Persian culture. So, back in the days in our culture, the kids had to either become an engineer or a doctor. There was no third option, or otherwise you couldn't have the blessing of your parents. So I love my parents, and I was scared of blood, so I became an engineer. So yeah, I know it is very thoughtful of me to become an engineer like that. But I did my undergrad in industrial engineering. I liked it, but obviously I did not love it. So like many of you guys who are struggling right now to figure out what is that thing that you love, I talked to many friends, family, professors at the time, but it wasn't quite helpful. The more I searched, the more I got confused. Until I took this econ course in my last year, the very last year of college. Back in my country, econ is not a gen ed course, so for engineering students, so I took it as an elective, and I was lucky, frankly speaking. Luck has a lot of things to do in my stories, though. It only took me a couple of sessions sitting in that actually, it was economics, principle of macroeconomics course, to realize that that's it. It just makes sense. One econ professor literally showed me the light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't change my major because I still love my parents and I was scared of blood still. So I got my undergrad degree in industrial engineering. I officially became an engineer. So now that my parents could call me Mr. Engineer, I was off the hook, and I think it was time to go after my passion. At the same time, I always wanted to run my own business, like many of you guys, I believe, do. So I decided to go to business school, getting an MBA with an emphasis in economics and finance. And of course, I ended up taking many other courses in econ and finance. Uh, then I co-founded my own company and worked in industry a couple of years during and after my MBA years. So life was really good, but still something was missing. I simply wanted to learn more about economics. I was voracious. I just wanted to learn more about that. So that's where I decided to go above and beyond. I left my family and country behind and came to North America, the land of, let's say, economists, right? Then I was not sure, however, that if I wanted to become a professor or not at the time. So I decided to just dip my toes into the water by doing a master in economics. So while I was doing my master in economics at Simon Fraser University, it's a university in Vancouver, Canada, there was no doubt left in me that I'm in love with it and I'm in love with this field. So I applied to PhD programs here in US. I got admitted by a couple of schools. I decided to go with the ASU Arizona State as it was my best financial option. They offered me full fund. So about the PhD years. So PhD years in econ started tough, depressing, different, back to slavery years, but totally worth it. I mean, it was totally worth it. Doing a PhD in econ helps you to look at the world around you differently. It helps you to model one of the most sophisticated and complex creatures on our planet, namely human beings. It is just beautiful and gives you power to understand how people think, what are the people's incentives and how we can analyze their behavior. It's a big deal. After all, whatever you do, you have to deal with people, right? So I finished my PhD in economics in 2016. I went to the econ job market in the same year. As a PhD students in econ, there's this job market for PhD graduates. It is very centralized conference happening once in a year. It's usually in January, and thousands of PhD applicants. I'm talking about econ and finance applicants. About 3,000 applicants from around the world get together in one place, and they compete with each other for, let's say, thousands of openings, both in academia and in the industry. So in academia, there's usually 80% of that job posting is in academia, 20% is in industry. And unlike a popular misconception out there are tons of things that you can do with a PhD in economics in industry. So as I was only open, again, by the time, I was only open to go to industry at the time. So I applied to around 100 industry positions as an economist. And the positions range from big tech companies, Amazon, Uber, Apple, to litigation companies like Cornerstone Research, and to financial institutions like BlackRock, Moody's Analytics, and DFA, Dimensional Fund Advisor. I think, as always, I was lucky enough to get an offer from BlackRock, which I accepted in a heartbeat. After all, it was the largest asset management company in the world, and I was about to go to the heart of the Wall Street at Manhattan. So long story short, I worked at BlackRock for about 13 months and doing economic research for the financial modeling team, basically modeling the behavior of mortgage owners, and predicting their actions in different scenarios, right? So for example, what happens when the interest rate drops, the prepayment speed increase, and it has some impacts on the mortgage-backed securities, right? So the output of our team as modelers, as econ modelers, was the input for the trading desk. They were trading mortgage-backed securities, and they got their input from our output. So basically, we were the modelers of the team. So with your econ degree, you can see you can literally work at even a Wall Street company without being directly involved in financial trading. I know there are many people who hate stock market, and guys, econ is not just stock market. anything which has something to do with human behavior, you can think of it as econ has something to say about it, right? Then what happened afterwards? So why I'm a professor? So then in 2018, my wife Sepida, she got a tenure track assistant professor offer from Huntsman School here. And I didn't tell you this part of my story that Sepida and I met 11 years ago when we were both doing MBA and have been classmates since then. Because it was almost impossible to do a 10-hour commute between Logan and Manhattan, I decided to quit my job and come here to Utah. Again, I was lucky enough that econ department offered me a visiting assistant professor position until I find a job. Maybe I find a job down in Salt Lake, right? This is the moment that changed my life again because I had no idea. During the first semester of teaching, I fell in love with it. I had no idea that I had this teacher inside me, which can satisfy me to its highest level. So as you can see, I became a professor purely by chance. So I hope that it's not disappointing to you, right? But if I had, so here's the point of it. So if I had the option to travel back in time and sit where you're sitting right now, I would have chosen this professorship path without a shadow of a doubt. Okay. Now that I have experienced both academic life and working plus 12 hours and sometimes 16 hours a day in Wall Street, I cannot emphasize it enough that how different the two worlds are. In academia, your time is much more flexible, and this is priceless. If you like teaching, if you like doing research, and maybe if you want to be your own boss, think of it. You have a combination of the three worlds by becoming a professor, right? I cannot think of any other better job in the world than becoming a professor that can satisfy these three things together. So my second story is going to be a short one. I promise. I told you that I'll tell you a joke. So let's see, what is that joke? So this is the joke is a story about a physicist, an engineer, and an economist who were starving and stranded on a desert island with no implements and tools, right? And they only had a can of food. So the physicists and engineers started speculating for hours and each devised a super complex mechanism for how to get that can open, right? Because they were starving. They were speculating ideas for hours, and then the economist came in and says, assume we have a can opener. Okay. So to me, to many scientists, this story is a joke, but to me, it was one of the most inspiring stories that I have ever heard. This is what you can do as an economist. You can abstract from all the complications out there and move on. You can look at the big picture without losing perspective. So my message to you guys today is that assume you have a PhD in economics and you want to go to academia, then what, right? So there are three routes that you can take. There's a tenure track route, clinical professor or lecturer, and the third route, which I took. So the tenure track is mainly focused on research. There is plus 60% research and 30%, 20% to 30% teaching and 10% service. So you have 5 to 6 years to make publications in top tier journals, and you will be evaluated after your tenure clock, which is, again, it is 5 years, but can be extended to 7 years as well. And then at the end of that evaluation, you will be either able to stay in the program or kicked out. And the ratio of being kicked out in econ field is the average is 1.5. So it takes 1.5 tenure for people to become a tenure track assistant professor, right? So you have to pick this route only if you're in love with doing research. Otherwise, it's a torture. You won't succeed. The second route, however, it's a non-tenured one. So it's a lecturer. In some universities, they call it clinical professor. And this route is mostly teaching. I can say 80% teaching and the rest is service. So the downsides are, of course, the payment is going to be less and it is non-tenured. But the upside is that you don't need to do research. And if you don't like it, you just simply don't do it. Research is tough. It's a 24/7 job, by the way, for those of you who are considering doing research. And the third route, that this is the one that I was lucky enough to be offered, it's something that not all the econ departments or the business school offer, and it's called professional practice route, which has its own path starting from assistant professor, go to associate professor, and then full professor. But you have the label of professional practice because you are someone with a industry background and you want to help students, mentoring them to go to industry or even academia. So it's a mix of the two. This is what I'm in right now. So my role statement is 65% teaching, 25% research, and 10% service. So you can do research if you want, but it's not as incentive as a tenure track route. And at the same time, you get a chance to teach and mentor students and maybe inspire the next generation. So this is what's really, really satisfying to me. And I don't regret making this decision last year. And I think maybe I thought that if I share this experience with you, maybe this is something that's helpful to some of you guys. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. I assume that you guys all know how an ordinary day of a professor looks like because you're dealing with professors all day. So just let me know if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
What? So you mentioned the route to go non-tenured and to teach mostly. What's the likelihood that someone would be able to get through a PhD who doesn't love research but does love teaching?
Yeah, actually, it is. I think the odds, in terms of odds, the odds are a lot higher than going to a tenure track position. So getting a tenure track position, it's a lot more challenging and difficult. But becoming a clinical professor, it used to be like this that in US especially, and even a master degree is enough. But nowadays it's way more competitive. So you have to have a PhD. Again, it's not you have to, but unless if you want to you want to go to a 2-year college, but even for a 2-year college, your competitors are having a PhD. So to answer your question is that the probabilities are a lot higher than going to a tenure track position, because again, it has its own downsides. But if you love teaching and you don't like doing research, this is the best option. You have a lot more free time on your hand. You may end up doing consulting as well outside the university.
And we have one more question from the chat. Someone says, for what type of person would you recommend a job like BlackRock? So maybe what kind of personality fits that job well?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, working for BlackRock as the largest asset management institution in the world, it is tough. It takes a lot of physical, I think, exercises, and sometimes it's a lot of it's a stressful. Now that I look back those days, it's very fast paced. It's a stressful, and sometimes once in a week you have to work from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. because the reports are they're time sensitive, right? So the institutions, the data centers will generate the reports Thursday morning, and you have to have the reported in by the Friday morning. So it's stressful. But in terms of the if I want to relate it to econ or finance, I can say, even though BlackRock you can think of it as a Wall Street company, but there are many, many job opportunities for economists there. I was working there as an economist, not as a financial advisor or things like that. So again, think of it this way, guys. As long as the job that you're going to do has something to do with humans, with human decisions, you as an economist will shine. So because economic teaches you how to think out of the box, how to model human behavior. And this is key. So whenever you are wondering what you can do in Wall Street with the econ degree, Wall Street is what? Is just a combination of a bunch of people, right? So the people makes the stock market. And so if you can analyze the behavior of the people, then you're good to go. But again, well, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of hours. Your times is not flexible. You have to work a ton. But so why should you do that? Because, well, the salary is insanely high. So I can say that. Yeah. Well, so maybe I add this thing and then wrap it up. I always thought it like this. When I said, if I wanted to stay in Wall Street, I was thinking maybe I'll do the 10 to 15 years and then I retire, because your body will depreciate so fast. And I think in 10 to 15 years, you can make enough money that you're good to go for the rest of your life. So that was the goal. But again, I was lucky enough to change my path, and now I'm a professor. I love it. So.
Thank you so much. That's cool to hear your experience, especially since you've had a foot in both worlds, in academia